I'm here with Howard from Amphibian and Reptile Conservation.
Hi Heather.
Hi, to learn a bit more today about the risks to our heathlands during winter.
Yeah, okay.
So-
We're coming up to Bonfire Night, so that's an important topic as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so what sort of pressures do the heathlands face during winter particularly?
Okay, well, I mean, we associate fires on the heath with the summertime, but they often happen in the winter as well. And it's important to make sure, particularly as we're approaching Bonfire Night, that we do what we can to avoid fires on the heath. So the first point I'd make is that it is actually illegal to have a bonfire on the heath, so that people do need to bear that in mind. And fires, particularly at this time of year, you get a lot of high winds, so fires can spread quite rapidly across the heath at this time of year. And the heath is still quite dry because we've had a long dry period in the summer, and even though it's been raining, some of the plants on the heath are very flammable, like gorse, so they can go up quite easily. So Bonfire Night particularly, there's a lot of things that people do. Obviously fireworks might come down and land, but there's things like lanterns as well. People like to set off fire lanterns, and you never know where they're going to land, so they could land anywhere on the heath and cause a fire.
Are there any management techniques that you employ to mitigate against the dangers of the heath catching fire?
The whole way that we manage heath has to take fires, or the risk of fires, into account. And particularly what we do on the large heaths is to break them up in blocks with fire breaks. And we make those fire breaks as wide as possible, not only so you can get fire appliances on them, but also to stop the spread of fire. So there are some ways that we can mitigate it in that respect. But the biggest mitigation is to avoid them happening in the first place. So it's discouraging people from using things like barbecues, being very, very careful if they do smoke on the heath. And from our point of view, from a management point of view, making sure that we don't have the particularly flammable vegetation like gorse alongside those fire breaks and alongside the paths. So we do try and keep the paths clear of things like gorse.
Do you use grazing animals at all? Do they help with the vegetation?
They do, yes, and we do use them. We use them on quite a number of sites, and they will graze but they typically graze at the younger vegetation. So I wouldn't say that the grazing animals were there to help control the fire, but the consequence of that is that if there are grazing animals on site and there is a fire, we've got an added risk. We've got a risk to the livestock as well, so we need to take that into account.
So with people getting ready for Bonfire Night, perhaps having bonfires at home,
yeah,
what sort of advice would you say to them?
Well, I think there's one key piece of advice. I always remember, for me, Bonfire Night when I was younger was the night of the year. I loved Bonfire Night, and we would have a big bonfire and we would roast potatoes in the bonfire, or baked potatoes in the bonfire. But the key thing is to make sure that no other animals are baked as well in the process. And even in those days, the bonfires that we built, they did attract hedgehogs. And hedgehogs and some of our reptiles and amphibians, particularly as we've had a very warm October, they've still been active, and right now they're looking for somewhere to hibernate. And we always used to, when we were building bonfires, we would always check around the bottom of them for things like hedgehogs to see whether they got into the bonfire. And particularly if you've got any damp material at the bottom of your bonfire, it's really important to check for things like toads, for slow worms, or for frogs and newts, which could also get in there. So don't build your bonfire too much in advance, build it quite late on, try and keep the material dry, and always do a check to make sure that nothing has crept in there that could get inadvertently baked.
Good advice. Thanks, Howard. I'd just like to wish everyone a happy and safe Bonfire Night.